Melanated family, we back. How's everybody doing? Brand new episode of the Melanated Convo podcast. Brand new year, man. This is the second or third show for the year. I'm happy to be back, family. Make sure mark your calendar every Monday at 7 p.m. on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can find the Melanated Convo podcast every Monday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you are not a subscriber of the platform you plan, let's get with it now. Today, because we know this is February, right? So it is Black History Month. You know what I mean? In most of my shows and the content, we focus on our people. But today, we're gonna do a little bit of history diving, right? Me and my brother Jermaine Morris gonna talk about some history, or the relevance of Black History Month. But we also gonna talk about some people and places through history. And I'm excited to have my brother back on the show with me. This is like my brother in the conscious movement. You know what I mean? Since I started my platform 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I reached out to this brother. We've been rocking ever since. My brother Jermaine Morris. How you doing, Jermaine?
Man, I'm doing great. This is our first time doing something like this on the new year, so happy new year.
Yes,
And
sir.
hitting this 2024, hitting the ground running.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm happy to have you back on the platform, my guy. Everybody, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Like I said, become a member of the team. So, like I said, what we're going to talk about today, we're going to get into some pieces of history that you may not have known. Some of you may have known it, but we'll talk about a few things. But the first thing I want to talk about with my brother Jermaine, right? Because every year, doing what I do now, every day, damn near, is Black History Month for me, right? So I'm always looking into things based on our history, based on what we're going through, just gauging things. Some Black folks, it's every February, right?
Yeah.
But at this point, Jermaine, I think Black History Month has been around since the 70s. What's the overall benefit at this point to our people? Like, do you think, of course, having it there available and that information, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
But overall, Jermaine, has it been beneficial to us? Do you think it's kind of helped our cause, helped our mentality, like in large numbers?
Yes.
Hmm.
So first off, yes, period.
Mhm.
And then I would say the part to that is that, so if you go back, I think it was what was it, and the people that you learned about in the beginning, the way that the information started to where it's at now, a lot of the information now is just kind of whittles down to, Martin Luther King,
Mm,
Rosa Parks.
I see
People
what you're
talk Black
saying.
history now. That's usually kind of what it all sifts down to.
Hmm.
Um, but for the people who take it a step deeper, my thing is whatever gets you there. So is Black History Month beneficial? Yes. To me, it's the same that if January 1st is the reason why you go to the gym for your New Year's resolution,
Hmm.
even if you don't stick with it, even if you don't apply the stuff for the rest of the year, if it got you in the gym working out at least for 2 weeks, that's better than not at all.
Yep.
So does Black History Month have a benefit? Yes, because if it makes you think about these things and research these things, learn about these things, if you're in school, write a paper, read a
Hmm.
chapter, something to get you familiar with the history, yes, then there's a benefit.
Definitely. And I love it because, just in my opinion, not enough of us find it interesting
Yeah.
to, on our own, look into different parts of our history, just on like a personal quest. So I love it because, and it could be used as a tool, like you were saying, just to motivate you. Maybe you're a person who hasn't really looked into our history, and then on one of these days of this month, you learn about somebody or you find out something, and that kind of motivates you to start digging a little bit deeper. Because I think sometimes we get lost on the fact that, in my opinion, we're doing all of this research about people from our history, and most of these individuals was fighting some type of injustice for the most
Yeah.
part. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think, reading about them and getting the information should make you go towards wanting to do whatever you can to do the same thing they did. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I think the problem with a lot of us is that we'll make the argument, of what's taught for Black history,
Hmm.
because we still operate in the sense of somebody else is supposed to bring the information to us for us to study.
How about that? Because I hear all the time they always talk about Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks. Yeah, that's on TV. You got a phone. You got a phone. There's libraries. There's Amazon sell books. There's no excuse
Yeah.
for any of us at this point to not, if you want to, figure out different individuals from our history besides the ones that they talk about. Because at
Yeah,
this point,
my thing is,
a lot of
why are
information
you
out
the
there.
fact that you got the month. They did on their part, they did their due diligence.
Yeah.
The other sects of the society, they're like, "Okay, we've conceded that February is Black History Month.
Hmm.
We're done.
That's it.
What you do with the month is entirely up to you."
How about that?
So if you wanna talk about Martin Luther King, we gonna play Roots, we gonna play, Selma, we
Yeah.
gonna show you Rosa Parks, we may bring up, a little we may touch on the Underground Railroad. We ain't going
Hmm.
too deep,
Yeah,
but
we
we
got
ain't
our
supposed
script.
to.
We not supposed to. That's your job.
This
That's why I'm hopeful of the month. Like
Yeah,
maybe parents or different people in our community will say, you know what? This February, I'm gonna start teaching my son or daughter
exactly.
about our history. But before you can teach your son or daughter, you got to be interested in it yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I look at, so with me, it's always a story, it's always a sidebar. Uh, I was doing radio and it was an internet-based station. And so what they told me is first, it was like, look, you've got 60 minutes of dead air. We don't care how you fill it.
Hmm.
So your slot is from here to here. So you're responsible for if you got ads, if you got what music, if you talking, whatever it is you're doing for 60 minutes, that this is your slot. We're gonna do whatever we doing with the rest of the station. The 23 hours of the day, that's not your concern. But from this hour to this hour is all you. Fill it however you want.
Hmm.
That's us with Black History Month. You give him February 1st to the 28th, 29th in the leap year. Fill it however you want to. Don't worry
Feel it.
about what, well, they only teach this and the rest of, okay, that's the other 11 months.
Yep.
Whatever. You got this month. If you want to focus on, Reconstruction, fine. You want to focus on slavery, that's your thing too. You want to focus on the Jim
Hmm.
Crow era, you want to focus on the civil rights, you want to look at contemporary stuff, art, music, history, inventions, political science, economics, whatever your fill fit your slot to fill.
Yep.
And so, but then when the month is over, when March 1st hits, when the new hour changes, don't start complaining about what we start playing at 11 o'clock.
There we go.
You
There
had
we go.
10
And
to
I think
10:59 to play whatever you wanted to play.
Yeah, I think that's why black folks, y'all need to, if you dig in the right way during that month, I think if you are a reader and just interested in interesting things, that like you just went over a litany of different industries and ways that we've affected this society.
Yeah.
There's so many different type of black people that you can
Yes.
tap in with. And the whole goal to me is use the month of February as a motivating factor. And now it's not a month thing, it's whenever you can get your hands on some information, or now you're looking for stuff. Now you're changing to a degree where, of course, you love in your family, but you love all of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely,
The same
definitely.
way, like I said, there's people who are still working out in September.
Hmm.
They may have started in January as their New Year's resolution, but they
Yep.
still at
There we
CrossFit in
go.
October.
There,
And if
there we go.
if you
There we
use
go.
February as your jump off, and then you start learning some stuff, and then you're like,
Mhm.
okay, I liked it. Like I didn't know about that.
I
I
didn't
didn't
know
know
about that.
about this and how this was connected to that, and
Hmm.
this begot this, and oh, this is from this country. Now you take it outside of this country, and you're like, oh, this is where this comes from.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
I'm gonna start learning about culture at its root. Oh, this
Hmm.
is actually, from the Congo. I thought it was
See?
Louisiana.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they
And
started doing this in Zimbabwe. I thought this was a
mhm.
Memphis thing. Like you could start attaching certain, cultural things, and you may go down a whole rabbit hole of stuff, and start learning about history and figures throughout time, and all because of it was brought to you in February.
And I think a lot of us need to realize the benefit of the personal journey of finding the information, right? Because I think someone telling you about someone from history, just seeing it on TV or a documentary, all that's a certain experience that can be helpful.
Yeah.
But getting on the internet yourself, pulling up a book, getting a name of somebody you didn't know existed within that structure. Now you go look up that person's name. Now you're on a rabbit hole of information, but really you're connecting with it in a different way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a difference between an investigation and an introduction.
Hmm. Break that down.
So an investigation is I'm going to look up like a police. We're investigating so and so,
Got it.
born here, lived here, was involved with this, whatever. An introduction is what this is something that means something to you. This is in like I was
Mm,
introduced to Frederick Douglass, or I was introduced to Malcolm X, or introduced. So now let me like delve into this person's interests. What were they involved in? What was some of the motivations that was out? What is some stuff that not only was written about them that they wrote personally? Like I'm
mhm.
looking at this through the lens of this is somebody I want to get to know versus this is somebody I
Got it.
want to examine.
Examine. Damn, that's a good point. And getting to know part, you
Yeah.
have to really want to get to know them. Something
Yeah.
about their life or something that went on has to pique your interest, and then nobody's gonna have to give you a book or
Exactly.
force something, as far as history is concerned. So this is good. There was a moment where I was like, once Black History Month is over, a lot of Black folks that I know don't really talk about our history no more or dig into it the way they did. But I'm like, you know what? Let me just be hopeful. And maybe the next year they'll finally get some information that'll make them, because it's a personal journey. Like I said, it's not
Yeah.
something you have to be telling everybody. But you should care about what we've been through. You know what I mean?
I look at it and liken that to holiday spirit.
Hmm.
You shouldn't just be nice to somebody because it's December 15th, December 20th,
Definitely.
December
Hmm.
23rd. If you'll give somebody you've never seen before, a $20 bill out your wallet in December, but you'll step over them with disdain and irritation in July,
Hmm.
like, you should still carry over that goodwill to all men in the middle of the summer, not just, in the winter. I think
That's
that's
a
the
fact.
same as that need of wanting to create those relationships with the ancestors, the foundational people who've not only may be a part of your lineage, but was definitely a part of this country. Like that type of thing does not have to be limited to just February. So if you're gonna be involved in February, it's still okay to be involved in July. If you're gonna be
It's
nice to
still okay.
somebody in December, you can still be cool to them in August. Like,
You damn right. You damn right. Yeah. So that's all. I wanted to discuss that because I woke up this morning and I was like, you know what? I'm I'm happy it's Black History Month because every year there's people that typically don't talk to me about history because they understand what I do. They find it in them to call me about something they find or send me something they found online
yeah,
or something. And it's cool to see someone who their interest is starting to peak when it comes
yeah,
to a certain topic. That's a good feeling. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, good. All right. So one thing I do want to do real quick, everybody out there, listen to me. Because we're talking about Black History Month, right? So the first thing I think, as far as history is concerned, the first thing I think we need to kind of acknowledge and make sure everybody knows, Jermaine, is the
yeah,
creator of Black History Month, which was a brother named Carter G. Woodson. Now I know a lot of people out there um, know this already, but some of you may not. So if we're in this month, it's important to know who actually created the idea. So Carter G. Woodson was a
yeah,
scholar. He wrote several books, historian, just really into the liberation of our people, Jermaine. And I think his story is one of, he once he became of age, he spent his life trying to make sure we knew our history, trying to make sure our history wasn't shut out of institutions to the point where he had to create his own.
yeah. Um, that feeling of like, okay, not only am I on this quest for knowledge, but I feel it's necessary that I share.
Hmm.
Um, and then he was the miseducation of the Negro.
Yep, I got that book.
You start looking at all the different ways that a lot of the information that's put in front of us was not accurate, and a lot of the stuff that was put in front of us was told in half truths, or it was just not told at all.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that it's people like him, people who have that capacity to just learn, and just sponges, and who can just keep getting all this information, knowledge, and then have a passion for the people of like, let me get this information to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
let me. It's important that we know these things. It's important. Those that don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. Like, it's important that
That's
we
a fact.
figure out where we come from, and that's helps with our in our day to day life. Because if you
Mhm.
don't think you've ever done anything, it's hard to believe that you can do anything.
Yes, and looking at a lot of these individuals from our past, another thing I love about it, Jermaine, is
Yeah.
these were individuals who actually existed, and what they were able to accomplish was astonishing because Carter G. Woodson seen that we weren't getting taught the proper history.
Yeah.
So he literally said, okay, I'm going to start something. So it says here he started the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in 1915. Um, he ended up starting a journal called the Journal of Negro History, which is still published today under the Journal of African American History. And in 1926, he started Black History Week. And in 1976, it became Black History Month. So that it's such an inspiring story when, I myself am doing something where I want to inspire my people and,
Yeah.
and empower as much as I can. And you never know who you affect and what he did, because think about it. If he didn't put in the put the things in places that he did, there will probably be no Black History Month. And this is one man just getting off his ass and saying,
Yeah.
I'm gonna make some changes.
Yeah, because there's a lot of us, like, there's a lot of us who are like-minded, so if what is it? If you build it, they will come.
Yep.
Like, for a lot of times, it's
That's
just
a fact.
simply like, if you just put something in place, you'll be surprised all the people start popping up with interest and then with input
That's a fact.
and with effort. And
That's a
so,
fact.
you take somebody who's had a passionate for something, who not only was interested in it, but was knowledgeable enough not only to be able to take information
Mhm.
and apply information, but then regurgitate it in a way that could be absorbed,
Mhm.
and then it was just on a mission to continue to do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
recognizing the value. Like, we had a brother who recently passed, Dr. Runoko Rashidi,
Yes. Yep.
brother who's had the pleasure of being in his presence once. And he spent his whole life traveling the planet, going all the different places Africans had been,
Mhm.
and he spent, decades upon decades of just learning,
Learning. Yep.
and sharing, the imprints that Africans have made across the globe. Even if you go more to a contemporary, um, mixed views on some of his other choices, but brother Tariq Nasheed,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so who a person who spent decades studying history across the globe and then showing it back in a way that's, a more modern version for people to
Mhm.
get the information. So it's a practice that's continuing to be done, that needs to be done, that definitely is a benefit. And
Yes.
that
And I think all of us can do a version of this.
yeah,
Like the educational piece, that was his thing. But the first thing was he decided that he wanted to help us because now, we with how everything is commercialized and just being here in America, we selfish. Like a lot of Negroes don't want to fuck with nobody. Like it's just about whoever is in these four walls in my house. That's who I'm
yeah,
gonna care about. And we need to realize, even though we've been through a lot of shit and systematic racism still exists today, we wouldn't be the little amount we've been able to move forward. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Black people who risked their life and wasn't at home with their family,
yeah,
wasn't just thinking about my kids. They was literally thinking about all of us. And a lot of these individuals are literally still here with us because we're still talking about them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That need, and I think that's important that they bring up historically too. A lot of the people who were really involved historically didn't need to. You
That's a
start looking
fact.
at a lot of civil rights
That's
people.
a
You start
fact.
working a lot of people who were involved in the struggle. A lot of them. Martin Luther King would have been straight.
He would have been a young pastor, a hot pastor. He could have done it however he wanted to do it.
Doctorate at what, 20 something, whatever.
Come on now.
Like
Come
he
on
could have
now.
very easily just went somewhere with Coretta and just
You know what I mean? I look at a lot of our brothers who articulate, who a lot even in today's time, a lot of
yeah,
these brothers who be fighting or bickering, I still be thinking, Jermaine, well, he could be a pastor if he wanted to.
yeah,
He could be in corporate America if he wanted to, using those same skills
yeah,
and not giving a fuck about us, but he's choosing to say, yeah, I know this information, I'm moving in this direction, and I want to take my people with me, and that's important.
Yeah, and that okay, so with that direction, that's why it's important about stressing the historical part of it,
Mhm.
is because if you don't know anybody who's ever you never heard of anybody who's ever done these things, you think about, well, what do you go to a middle school anywhere in America and you find specifically young black kids, specifically young black boys, first off. What do you want to be when you grow up? They start with what's most publicized.
Yep.
So they think that athletics or entertainment is the way
Hmm.
because they see that all the time. They don't
Yep.
get told all the time that the generations of engineers, of
Right.
dentists,
Hmm.
of physicians, of psychiatrists and psychologists, of just of craftsmen, of just like all the stuff who you don't learn about those the businessmen and the entrepreneurs. You don't get the history on these people, so you realize there's a blueprint that already exists
Hmm.
more than just these ones.
Definitely. And these are a lot of young people who have, depending on how old they are, they've been through several Black History Months already
Yeah,
and still don't know this information.
yeah,
That's why the parents and the people in the community have to see fit to, you know what, this month, maybe just every February, I'll make it a point to read my kids some books about it, give them information, because if not, you're really relying on the school system, and they've shown us what they're gonna do.
yeah. They don't know two books written by Carter G. Woodson, but they can give you Lil Wayne's Rise to Stardom, mixtape by mixtape, album by album, in
This is a
chronological
fact.
order. To greatness.
This
So
is this
sometimes
is a
it's
fact.
just what's presented in front of them, and it's
Yep.
not. I don't think it's necessarily due to a lack of interest. I think a lot of it is just lack of exposure.
Lack of exposure. That's
Lack
why
of exposure.
parents, I think a part of being Black in this country and being a young person and growing up, I think a part of your psyche should be leaning towards, okay, uh, I know I have to be financially stable. I know I have to have a mate. I know I have to have certain things in place to make sure my family gets off in the right direction. But I also need to equip myself with some knowledge. I
Yeah,
need to equip myself with just the terrain, like everything that my people have been through. So if my kid is the question, you know how many parents I know whose kid has had like a racialized incident at school or had a
yeah,
question about the uprisings or something that was happening at the time, and the parent didn't know what to say.
yeah.
And those are opportunities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't do it as a knock to parents, depending upon how old you are, depending
Mhm.
upon what school
Yeah.
district you came through, level of education, all that on
Mhm.
your come up. Um, but if we're looking at it now, information age. This is more access to information than has ever existed in all of human history.
Mhm.
You know, you've never had a chance to get this at your fingertips in everybody's pocket. You
That's a
can learn
fact.
almost anything at any given time, anywhere. And so now, okay, I gotta make a conscious effort. The same way I'll make an effort to go out in the backyard and throw the ball, the same way I'll
Mhm.
make an effort to go drive somebody to practice, the same way I'll make an effort to go do A, B, and C. There are some other things that we can make an effort for.
Yeah, because a lot of Black parents are involved, and then like you just said, they're bringing them to practice, they're bringing them to violin, whatever extracurricular activity, they're right there with them helping out. It just has to be a mentality shift where we see the importance of including the history piece too. Now, next bit of history I wanted to discuss with everybody. We are at this point, speaking of popularized Black history, um, most of us are aware of Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how that played out, and the travesty of that situation. But another all Black community that I think all of us should be aware of is Seneca Village. And a pretty cool thing about Seneca Village to me is it used to be where Central Park is now in
Yeah,
New York, which is a landmark in that state. But it's an interesting thing, Jermaine, because to my understanding, as far as how much of a thriving community that was there in Seneca
yeah.
Village, it rivaled what Black Wall Street was. Just a lot of us don't know about it.
Yeah, I think the only difference between it is so whereas uh Tulsa, that area was all black, like
Mm,
where Black Wall Street, Seneca Village was like two
makes sense.
thirds black.
Makes sense.
It
Yep.
it was a combination of blacks and then
Blacks, yep.
Irish immigrants.
Irish, and then a little bit of German. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
And Seneca Village was, I think it started in 1825 until like 1857, and the eminent domain scenario took place.
Get down, lay down.
Get down and lay down. You know what I mean? And that's just Seneca Village. So everybody look that up. Look up Seneca Village, the details behind it. Very interesting stuff, because that's one of many
Yeah.
environments that we lived in that we were thriving. That's why we always should. That's why history is important, because we need to understand that if we were left alone to our own vices, we would be fine, y'all.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, because that's
it's
the
happened
thing that
before.
comes up. Everybody looks at, well, what if black people in this country or Africans across the globe? Well, what have y'all done? You know, okay. The thought process is that there has not been an impact outside of culture done by Black Americans, African
Mhm.
Americans specifically, because most of the things that were done in this country were either not credited to them or erased when it came to telling the story.
That's a fact.
Bunch of inventions that Black people couldn't get patents for,
Mhm.
things that were known at the time, and then you wash it a few times and you start changing the names, and it's like all of a sudden when they replace Lionel and the Jefferson, you just come back season 3 and it's a new guy and just don't nobody say nothing.
Mhm.
They just started revising how things went, and if
Yep.
you didn't know before, and the people who knew before start to fade out, and you tell the new story. So then it gets to start thinking of, okay, well, maybe I haven't done anything.
Yep.
Maybe my people haven't contributed. Maybe we're
Mhm.
not known for this. And when I start hearing these narratives from other groups and other people, I may start to believe that because I don't know the evidence to the contrary. So
I don't
I
know
don't
the
know
evidence.
what my
Yeah.
people have done to argue, no, we have done this.
Mhm.
No, we have been instrumental and influential in these areas. So I think that history is, even though it's a look back, it's a baton passing forward.
It's a baton passing forward, because these Black Wall Street, Seneca Village, they own their homes. They were running the grocery stores, the banks. They were self sufficient, and
Yeah.
this is right after slavery. Like they were self sufficient. So that can happen again. Now, granted, we do have the narrative that when we put these things together and create our own enclaves, Jermaine, the government, i.e., racism, white supremacy, whatever you want to call it, finds a way to infiltrate or to destabilize the environment so they can then come in. Of course, that's something we always have to look at, but it's a model of possibility. It has been done, so it can be done again.
Yeah, and I think that so, because what happens is that I think the issue in this country is when you start talking about Black people in America, they go back to slavery and then they go to civil rights,
Yep.
and there's a whole lot that happened in between.
Yep.
And so when most people think of when Black people are talking about the history, they're like, okay, well, either you guys were in chains or you're talking about the riots throughout the '60s.
Hmm.
Okay, well, immediately following, the Emancipation Proclamation, without going on too deep of a history lesson,
Go ahead.
there were Black communities that were thriving,
Yep.
that families were intact, that communities were built up and were establishing themselves and were doing okay. And
Hmm.
so even through the century that followed slavery, because we never talk about the century after. When they talk about slavery, they go back to 1865. They always remove the Jim Crow, the century
Yeah.
that followed from
Yep.
1865 to 1965, all the mess. And even in the midst of all that, families were together, schools were being built, industries, Black people were across the country were making moves
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
trying to build. And so I think that when you remove those types of stories, don't just talk about when we was in shackled, or talking about when it's at the tipping point of the resistance. Well, what was going on? What did families look like? How were marriages? What were communities? Where have we been when we're quote unquote left alone?
Hmm.
What did we look like? And
Yep.
then start making that comparison when you start talking about other groups who came over as immigrants. Because
Exactly.
the argument is, well, this group came over and they
Yeah.
all of a sudden did A, B, and C. Okay, well,
Yep.
let's compare that group that you're talking about with the groups after 1865 that were left alone, and start seeing if that's more of an apples to apples comparison before
Definitely.
these other things, influences were put in to start chipping away at them. But all these things come up in history, and all these things come up, and it takes being um, intentional to learn these things.
I was just gonna say that, Jermaine. You can just the knowing this information helps your perspective so much.
Yeah.
It can help your self-esteem. You can some of the stuff you're looking at in this country. If you want a great explanation of why it is the way it is,
Yeah.
or why it's set up the way it's set up, you got to look at the history of it,
Yeah.
and then you
And
be like, oh, okay,
when you go back and you go through history, when you really look at history, like really, really look at it, you recognize nuance and variation, and you start seeing that if you're somebody who is not familiar with Asian people, you could. What's the difference between a Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese? No clue. All the same. It's the same thing when you start talking about Africans.
yep,
So when you start looking at, well, what's black people's issue or Africans in America? Okay, you're taking it like we're all the same.
mm-hmm.
Like we've all been on the continent the same amount of time. Like we've all had the same shared experience across the nation. It's not true.
Yep,
So when you start looking at, okay, well, this is the impact of Africans that came up through Jamaica. This is the impact of Africans who came out pre 1600. Here's the ones that came pre 1700, the ones that came pre 1800. There's a difference if you've been in this country 5 generations versus 2.
yeah,
There's a
a
difference if
big
you
difference.
came where you came through the transatlantic slave trade. Where you stopped off at made a difference in was it French? Were they Portuguese? Were they Spanish? What was it? Like when you start learning the history and the nuance of these things? Okay, this is why this group here had this impact with these resources, with this invention that impacted this region. Oh, okay.
All day long.
And it starts removing these blanket statements and
Hmm.
these monolithic type ideas, and then you start humanizing Africans as individuals instead of taking a continent of over 50 countries and making it one group, and
That's
then making the history in this country one group, instead of saying, okay, just like how Native Americans had tribes and those different tribes had different experiences and different, so did Africans here.
mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you learn that,
History is yep.
and when you learn that stuff, then it starts, okay, I can start personalizing and humanizing it more, and then I can become more invested in a relationship and start
Yeah.
seeing myself more in this.
Mm, that really is the key to life. That getting familiar with a new person in your life or a different race of people or whatever the situation may be, you got to kind of dig in a little bit
Yeah.
and get to know, and the information will change everything. You know what I mean? So definitely. So Seneca Village, Carter G. Woodson, the creator of Black History Month. If your children don't know that, please, there's books about it. You can go online and look up the information, but this is just to pique your interest, and you guys
Yeah.
can dig in and get more information if you want to. Next thing I want to talk about, and this is actually the first, when I thought about history, this was probably one of the first things I thought about. This story um, was very inspiring to me. So the Haitian Revolution that took place in 1804. I think the war started in the late 1700s, but 1804 with, you know,
Yeah.
people in Haiti fighting the French, fighting the Germans, I think too. This was important to me, Jermaine, because to my understanding, this is the first and only like all black army that was able to defeat white people to a degree. You know what I mean? And go ahead.
Sort of. So I mean, because you got to remember that there were many, many attempts to invade the continent
Hmm.
that were not successful. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of colonization that it was attempted to happen on the continent. Of all African soldiers held them off
Got it.
for long periods of time. There's a whole lot of colonizers who got slaughtered when they got introduced to Zulus.
Hmm.
So there's not the only African army that's held off. But I do
Hmm.
know I know what you mean though when you start talking about in this respect that they held off a full-fledged army assault. I
A
think that's what
full-fledged
it's
army
kind of
assault.
like.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I think so. What history with that is that right there, the Haitian Revolution dramatically changed the landscape of the United States of America
Hmm.
because of the Haitian Revolution led to or was directly impacted Louisiana Purchase.
Mhm.
So you had Napoleon, and then they sold the French territory, which is basically whatever Louisiana, to the United States, because it went from Park Place and Boardwalk to Baltic and Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
Like once the French no longer had that impact, had no longer had the game on lock, that the land here became basically almost useless because it wasn't, because France was en route to just was on the takeover. And so Haiti holding its ground and stopped shutting that off there dramatically changed France's impact in the United States through the territories near Mexico. Like it changed all that stuff. So how this country developed, how Mexico developed, Latin American countries are directly benefited and were impacted by what happened with Haiti.
Yeah, and it was such a level of togetherness that
Yeah.
it took, because the people in Haiti, they were using like African spirituality to kind of help them through the process. Toussaint Louverture was the gentleman who kind of led the army and was a real good brother, and they ended up catching him and killing him, and then John Jacques Dessalines stepped in, and
Yeah.
to me that just showed that the movement was the leader.
Yeah.
Like what we're trying to get done is the leader, not an individual, because they fought without fear. That's the biggest thing that I
Yeah.
took from the story, Jermaine, that they wasn't scared of white folks, man. They said, look, I'm gonna die or we're gonna get this done.
I
Like I'm
think the
not.
difference is they're similar to when you start thinking of like Cuba. Like Haiti is not geographically that big, and it's surrounded by water.
Mhm,
There's nowhere to go.
there's nowhere to go. Yep.
So when you start talking about back against the wall,
Hmm.
like this
That's the
is really
definition.
it. Like this
Yeah.
is like they're coming to these beaches, and there is no, you can't. It's not I'm gonna run up to Canada. I'm gonna go over to here. I'm gonna flee here, and then I'm gonna go over. There is nowhere to go. So it
Hmm.
put you back against the wall, knuckle up, protect your neck, and hold your ground. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was a definitely lack of, there was no fear. There was, we are willing. Literally, this is the hill we're willing to die on.
And they had a code of conduct.
Yeah,
In order to get things done in that manner, there has to be a level of togetherness. Like the mentality has to be the same. And to my understanding, some of the coons they had are individuals who were on the fence.
yeah.
They made sure they handled everything.
Well, so that directly ties into what I'm saying. So insane number. I mean, it was like maybe the 80%, something crazy, like
Mhm.
of the slave revolts in the United States were tripped up due to snitching.
All day long.
Like it was a huge percentage. Like there was like,
Meritorious manumission. Yeah.
yeah. So there was always a Steven in the squad that
Hmm.
that gave up the route, that gave up the path, that gave up the guy, that was just
Always.
like, because the goal, because then it was like it's a big wide territory, we're outnumbered. If they come in, I can, like there was a plan B. So snitching on the revolt, there was a plan B. When they come
Hmm.
through, I can still make it to the next level. The difference in Haiti is that they're coming to eradicate us. There is no plan B.
There is no plan B. How about that?
Like if we lose this thing here, that's it.
Hmm.
We done taken too many of their lives. We done put too much of a fight up. Like we done changed the game too much across it. They're not going to. There's not going to be any peaceful coexistence after this battle.
Hmm.
So it's like there is no tomorrow if we lose today.
Yeah, and
So
and to my understanding, Jermaine, a part of why Haiti is in turmoil today and has been
directly
is
to that.
because of that,
Yeah.
directly tied to their success in 1804. Is that true? I heard that. I haven't researched that
Yeah,
part.
because it messed with the church's money.
Mm.
So that's
How about it?
literally the biggest. If you say why was all these sanctions and all this and
Hmm.
price gouging and cutting them out of opportunities and all this, because they literally it messed with the church's money.
Mess with the church's money, and they wanted to
So
make an example out of them. But
yeah, so they paying 5 times the amount for their own stuff,
hmm
limited access, just,
yep,
I mean, cut off from all types of outside resources and
the
help,
trading and everything.
all
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
stuff. It's like, you mess with the church's money, so we're going to make an example out of you type thing.
Yep, cut them
And
off, but cut
yeah,
them
they're
off
still feeling the
economically.
effects.
They're still feeling the effects of it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But inspiring story nonetheless, because and you made a good point by saying they had no other options, like their back was against the wall. It's almost like sometimes, Jermaine, I think our level of togetherness and like being on code the way we need to,
Yeah.
some of this isn't there the way it should be because we don't think it's bad enough.
Got options.
We got we got
You
options.
got options.
Yeah.
Like it's because that's and so when people talk about what was the biggest destabilizing thing in this country, that's why it doesn't get addressed as much. But a lot of people look to integration,
Mhm.
is because prior to integration, there was no plan B.
There we go. I had to go to a black dentist. I had to go to a black
If you
store.
gonna see a dentist, he has to be black.
I had no
If you're
choice.
going to a school, it has to be a black school. If you want
There
to
we go.
get a house, it has to be in a black neighborhood.
There we go.
Has to be a black. Has to be black everything.
Yes, I
There's no
think
plan. There's no option.
yep, I think in hindsight, integration was a problem. That because that option, once they gave us that option, some black folks never let it go, even in
Yeah.
2024. You
And
know what I
so
mean?
once you then had the choice, that's when you start getting all these holes. When it was this, it's this or that. And I'm not going too deep down that rabbit hole. The real thing was integration wasn't even a push for most folks. It was desegregation.
Mhm.
I just don't want to be against the law.
Yep. Yep.
Like we don't have to. You don't have to. Start busting kids and force people. I just need it to not be illegal anymore. But that's the thing though. Once you start incorporating options, the idea that I can opt out, the idea that I can get in, that I can make enough money to no longer be affected. Back then, it didn't matter how much money you made. If you're black, you're black.
You a doctor and the garbage truck driver lived right next door to each other.
And the heavyweight champion.
and the heavyweight champion, and then somebody from Motown
Yeah,
lived
you
upstairs.
remember Harlem Nights?
Mhm.
Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Red Fox, and all that.
Yep.
Where they
Yep.
had like Sugar Ray's, the nightclub, and in the club was the hustlers next to the prominent folks, and the champ came in, and it was like that was it.
That was
Like
the only hangout
the
spot we had.
prestigious prominent folks live right next to everybody else.
Yep. In harmony, like enough for it to be a functioning situation. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Now we make it seem like we can't live around each other. And
Oh,
damn,
we make it
Jermaine, I
like
guess
$10,000 means we can't live next to each other now. You went from 30 to 40,000, all of a sudden you acting brand new.
you acting brand new because of that damn option.
Don't go
You know
from
what I mean?
40 to 50 or 50 to 60.
Come on now. Come on now. Yeah. So that's a part of our history too that everybody needs to be keen.
Yeah.
So everybody, if you're just joining us, me and my brother Jermaine Morris is talking about Black history, talking about a few figures through situations and people
Yeah.
that have greatly affected the situation we're in today. We talked about Seneca Village. We talked about the Haitian Revolution. So we're talking about now. We talked about Carter G. Woodson, the creator of Black History Week, later becoming Black History Month. So this is good, man. Like this is all meant for inspiration. Now, last but not least, and this is always once I learned about this brother, I was awed because there's versions of this type of guy now who does a little bit of everything. You know what I mean? So if you guys aren't aware of a brother named Paul Robeson, please look him up, family. Because when I first read about him, Jermaine, I thought it was an error. Like this brother was a football player. This brother was a singer. This brother was an actor. I said, wait a minute. No goddamn way. He did all of it. And the point is, he did it all, Jermaine, and still found time to stand with his people.
Yeah. 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 And he spoke like 20 something languages. I think it was
Craziness, man. Talking about motivated.
Yeah.
Talking about an inspiration. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you find somebody who's just like, so why the importance of history? When you're like, okay, maybe I don't see myself in Dr. King. Maybe I don't see myself in Malcolm.
That's a good point.
Maybe maybe I don't see myself in Garvey.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're already intellectual. Maybe you're a little more Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you start seeing these people who are like, no, these people walk the earth. These people were
They
evolved. These
walk the
people,
earth.
you know, and they look like me, you know.
And Paul Robeson is another. He's a good example to me how yeah, you could be an athlete,
Yeah,
but that kind of goes to what we were just speaking about, how we were
right,
all together at one point where we, there weren't any other options. But back then, a lot of those brothers who were singers or athletes, any of the entertainment realm, they knew what it was. They
yeah,
they knew they had to align themselves with their people if they want to get shit right. You know what I mean?
yeah, because you were told every day what it is. And I think that
Mhm.
that's a difference that's changed too. So like
True.
there wasn't all this covert,
Racism.
racism or
Yeah. Yeah.
discrimination. There was
Yep.
signs on the building.
There were signs on the building.
There were
That
signs on the town when you came up on county lines.
sundown towns.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
let you
imminent
know
danger.
whatever you got to do, but by the time the sun go down, you need to be up out of here.
Yep.
And so you weren't wondering or confused about what it was, and so
You
you
couldn't
knew it wasn't tax bracket based.
and you couldn't walk that line like an athlete can do now, or entertainer can do now. Kind of act like you don't know, or I want
Yeah.
to stay out of that. No, it was right in your face. They was treating everybody like niggas
Oh yeah,
openly.
they'll show those old clips of the boxers where it would be the black guy fighting a white fighter, and every time the black fighter hit the white fighter, they would get the black would start stand up and start cheering, and then
Hmm.
as soon as the white fighter hit the black fighter, the black people sit down, the white people stand up and start cheering.
Yep.
Like it was very very clear,
Very
where the
clear.
lines were drawn, and
Hmm.
and to be in that space and to be in that to live with that like always running, like regardless of what's going on in your family, your day-to-day life. You could be in a good marriage with good kids and you love your neighbors and all that, but it's like a lot of boxes on your laptops. Like that thing is always running in the background.
Hmm.
So even though you
Hmm.
may not have had any type of incidences that day, maybe you only dealt with black people that day and you were just living and existing and nothing was what happened. It's always running. That motor is always running that on any given day, something could pop off.
Hmm.
And so that degree of like always kind of that humming, that stressful hum that's always going, you still
Hmm.
found a way to just excel and just learn and study and grow. And so I think I've seen people like that bringing those to young people who think that whatever they're dealing with now is what's keeping them out of position.
That's a fact.
You don't know what I came through, man. I had to grow up in this and I had to do that. Yeah, but let me show you. But not that long ago, here are
Not
some of
that
the other
long ago.
conditions.
Hmm.
'Cause I think that's the problem too. We always jump to we talk about black people, African struggle in America. Everybody talks about slavery and they start at the beginning. They'll be like, 400 years ago, it was this. No, slavery wasn't that long ago. The
Wasn't that
ending.
long ago.
And then we start talking about a lot of the people, prominent figures, inventors, creative minds, and so we're talking
Hmm.
about people in the 1900s.
The 1900s, the 1900s that walked this earth.
Yeah,
And because you just mentioned, because things just is the more things change, they really stay the same. That's
yeah,
why I think that the parallel in history is important, because you just mentioned boxing, right?
yeah.
So Jack Johnson,
Jack
first black
Johnson.
heavyweight, he got treated
Jack
a
Johnson was a
particular
beast.
way. He was a goddamn beast, but because of his prowess in the ring, the powers that be tried everything they could to dismantle him and put him in jail and break him down. And you look at Floyd Mayweather, what's the difference?
Jack
It's just
Johnson used
overt now.
in the era of like now they was talking about rich black athletes, they all go out and get Caucasian mates. Back and now it's more of like a social commentary, but it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like there's not legal ramifications like that.
yeah.
In Jack Johnson's era, it was
Hmm.
like that was still illegal in states and counties. And he used to go and get him talk too hard on your show. He used to get Caucasian prostitutes
Uh-huh.
and walk around flaunt like I'm the champ.
Yeah, with
If you
fur
want to do
coats on.
something, do something to me, do it in the ring, and then he go out and knock out the dude, and then go home with
You go
two of
home
them
with Becky in a nice ass car,
on his arm, flaunting like
flaunting it
Jack
after
Johnson was a
just
problem.
after just fighting 29 fucking rounds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With tissue tied around her head, like it wasn't even like gloves. It ain't like now with these big
It
old
was
padded
crazy.
gloves. It was
Yeah,
he was fighting with mittens on, and
fine with
just
mittens on. So when I see Mike Tyson get treated a particular way, when I
yes.
see Floyd Mayweather get treated a particular way by this system, I say, Jack Johnson did too. Jack Johnson did too. It was just more like we were saying, it's more prevalent then, like more in your face, but it's the same system running the same script. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that makes history very important.
yeah, definitely. I think that it's you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. Yeah,
1000%.
and if you don't know history, you don't. It's to me, it's simple. It's just a playbook, and the more you know the playbook, the more you know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they said some of the best battles in football were Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. They're both it was against Ed Reed. He's a defensive back for the Baltimore Ravens
Mm-hmm.
because he knew just as many plays as those guys. Peyton Manning was known for being like a supercomputer in his brain.
Mm-hmm.
Had a you scream in Omaha, had 1,000 variations of every
Always
play
made the right decision.
based upon what he could see in front of him.
Yep.
Ed Reed was the counterpart defensively. He
Hmm.
could drop back and tell this motion here, this movement here. I know where this guy is going. I know where that guy is going. I know where everybody because I have a history, a knowledge of all these playbooks that I've seen and studied and all the tape I've watched. So I know what I'm looking at when I see it, and I can get myself in position to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Mm-hmm.
comes from learning history. That you're not just falling for the alley oop or for the hezzy, because you know what happens. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've seen what this guy moves here, this guy moves here. Now this guy moves there.
Yep. And while we're on that, that goes for our history, but that's really the history of anything.
Definitely.
That's how I approach stuff. If I want to learn about something, a topic, a race of people, like
Yeah.
anything, do a little digging into the history of it, and then it'll begin to make more sense to you. So
Yeah,
that's
Greeks
everything.
and Romans dedicated so many thousands and thousands of man hours to African history and spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Like they understood,
Yep.
like I
They,
need to
they learned
learn what they know.
it. Yep.
Like they're like, no, I
Yep.
need what's that playbook? What they
Mm-hmm.
doing over there? What
Yeah,
are
and they
they
did their
with
best
like
to get in there too to make sure that now that they learn it, shit, they want it for their own,
and
or they
then
want it for
burn
themselves.
down the library after they took what they wanted and burned it down so y'all don't come back and learn nothing new.
But they knew the value of the information.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, so it's not even about so that's what comes in the history. It's not just the individuals, but history,
Hmm.
you know, and learning what's come before you. And then it helps you better to see what's coming in the future. And then you know, the like I said, then that history works as a baton and you can give the information to the person coming up. They don't have to go
Hmm.
all 10 miles to see what's in mile 11. You could tell them mile 1 what's on mile 11. So
Exactly.
by the
And
time they get to mile 11, they're now on mile 22, and that's further
hmm.
than you ever got.
Yep. 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 And that's that's why some of these brothers are so important because they thought they had a group think mentality.
Yes.
And ultimately, I think all of us, because I understand these days, like being consumed with your family and the problems you guys have and everything surrounding that. I get that. But if you don't like the issues that we face in this country, I'm sorry to tell you, white folks is not coming to save us. There's going to be a level of groupthink required for us to get out of
Yeah.
this shit.
Yeah, and I think the difference is it's not even are other cultures going to come in and help out. It's the splintering within culture.
Mm,
There are more and more movements of black people in this country who are just cutting ties with other black people.
yeah,
So it's
that's a
not a
fact.
question of it's just like okay, we if we ain't all gonna come along, then y'all go over and do what you want to do. We're going over here.
Hmm.
So before you even get to another group coming in, you got to get the original group back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
And
you got to get the band back together.
yeah, yeah, and that makes it difficult because, like we were talking about with Haiti, I mean, then you got to look over your shoulder. If you have a group of individuals who are on the fence or
Yeah,
not necessarily going the same direction you're going, then you have to worry about the infiltration. You have to worry about COINTELPRO type shit. You know what I mean? That's how that becomes so prevalent.
yeah. So I mean, I think learning about those things.
Hmm.
So when you're approached, you understand what you're being approached to do.
That's a fact.
When these quote unquote options and opportunities are put in front of you, you have a base point to understand. Oh, this is not just somebody giving me some money. This is not just somebody giving me an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this playbook. I've seen this play on this page in this playbook. I know what this is.
Yep.
So instead of just being short-sighted and taking the money or taking the opportunity, okay, nah, I'm not going to do this because I know what this leads to. But I don't
Yep.
know what this leads to if I don't know what's come before me.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
That is definitely a fact. Thank you very much, my brother Jermaine Morris, man. Happy to have my brother back on the show. But this was good. History is important. And I just thought of a few different people in situations that came to mind. But let's make this a habit, everybody. Like, figure out, because like Jermaine was saying, you could be into the individuals from our history who were scientists or more of nerds, or some people can like the athletes, comparing it to the athletes of the day. Regardless of what you're into or how you look at the world,
Yeah.
there's somebody black who was successful and forward thinking in that respect. So
Yeah.
do yourself a due diligence and find them.
Yeah. Amazing playwrights.
Yes.
Amazing mathematicians.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
engineers and in medicine and in mental health and in all these physics in all these different areas. And so it's not
Yep.
something that's outside of us.
Mm-hmm. And
You
it's
know,
so interconnected with what happens now. When you learn about a lot of these individuals, you'll learn, oh, okay, some of the practices and procedures that are used today by hospitals or big corporations,
yeah,
some of that shit came from us.
yeah. You'd
Yep.
be surprised at percentage.
You'll be surprised.
You'd be surprised the percentage.
You'll be surprised. So everybody, please, man, hit the like button, subscribe. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Melanated Convo podcast. If you're listening on one of the digital platforms, leave a comment. You can subscribe there as well. But, I'm happy to be back. Brand new year. I thought this would be important for me and my brother Jermaine to kind of, to touch on some different topics through history. And then some other things came up through history. So I think that was good. I appreciate you joining me today, brother.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Now, please, Jermaine Morris, do me a favor and tell everybody where they can find you, bro.
The easiest thing for stimulating conversation like this, you can just go to any social media platform. They're all at J Morris CEO. That leads you to everything else I do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because my brother got some good stuff coming too.
Yeah.
He'll be back on the show in the future, and we'll be discussing some of the projects that he has brewing. I'm your brother Harrison, Melanated Convo Podcast. At Melanated Convo 100 is the Instagram page. That's where I post most of the information about the show, different things I have going on. And like I said, man, Monday nights, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on YouTube or the digital platforms. This was good. Learning about our history is a stepping stone in a particular direction. Sometimes when I meet individuals who critique me because of how I think, because I'm thinking outside of my family and about the global black family, I can almost guarantee they don't know history or they don't care to know, because learning our history, it creates something inside of you where then you feel the connection. A lot of us walking around feeling like we're not connected to shit. And that's the problem. You know what I mean? So tune in every Monday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is your brother Harrison, Melanated Convo Podcast. Again, my brother Jermaine Morris joined me today. Happy to have my brother back. We out.